Hello, everyone.
Hello.
We're just letting people in to the tech support.
Of taking a look at, in your school, the number of air changes per hour and the filtration in that system.
Thanks. So this side, there's a lot going on, folks, in this slide.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Might be morning, midday, maybe even early morning or nighttime where you are. My name is Vanessa Lujan, and I direct the BaySci program at the Lawrence Hall of Science at the University of California, Berkeley. Thank you for joining us for our pre-conference tech support and conversation time. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions in the chat. If you have burning tech questions or maybe wondering where to access the schedule on our conference website, for example. I see that some people are giving their salutations and where they're from. If you do have a tech question, just given that people are using the chat to kind of welcome each other, if you can mark your question, letting us know that it is a tech question, maybe tech Q, and then stating your question if you do have a specific tech question or tech support question, so that we can find your question easily as people log onto the conference. You may also unmute yourself and ask a question out loud. And when you do, it would be wonderful for us to hear your name and where you're from as well.
Hi, this is Louise Chapman from Florida, and I see everyone else's faces but mine. What do I do to share mine?
Okay, so at the bottom of your screen, and Louise, are you connecting by a computer or by phone?
Computer.
Okay, so at the bottom left of the screen, you should see a video camera icon.
Yeah, where it says stop video or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I hit start video, so it should show, but it's not. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I have a face, I promise. Thanks, everyone.
You can also click on the little arrow next to the video icon, and that will pull up a menu where you can click,
integrated.
select the camera.
I have a question.
Yes.
So yesterday I could access the schedule through my, I'm sorry, this is Cindy Duncan and I'm in Virginia. I could access the schedule, and today when I go in on my laptop to access it, it says I am not allowed.
Try reloading the site.
Okay, thank you.
That was happening to a couple of us too, Cindy. So yeah, I believe we fixed that glitch. And if you just reload the site, let's see. So I see, Cindy, you also posted your question in the chat, and I'm just going through the chat. Will any of the concurrent discussions be recorded? So unfortunately, they are not going to be recorded. However, our main session here today and the keynote speakers will be recorded because we are live streaming on YouTube. And that was because that was an intentional decision not to record those discussions. One, because there may be breakouts and you would just be looking at the main screen, not being a part of any of those discussions in the recording. And then also because we felt like the facilitators proposed a topic that we would want everybody to feel comfortable voicing what they have experienced, what they are thinking about in a free way. Ted,
I'll add, this is Craig. I'll just add that in the sessions, we're going to be taking notes on a platform called Padlet. And while the sessions, the breakout sessions are not going to be recorded, the notes will be available from Padlet.
Thanks, Craig. Craig is part of our BaySci and BEETLES team. So Miss Molly has a tech question around, will we have the capability to use polling? So if you are a facilitator of that breakout or concurrent session, and you are using your own Zoom Pro account, then you should, depending on your subscription, have access to polling. If we, staff at the Lawrence Hall of Science, BaySci and BEETLES, are Zoom hosting for you, please communicate with your Zoom host right now, if possible, to let them know so that they can set up that polling ahead of time. Let's see. Another question from our friend Rudy. Do we have a document that we will be working in our sessions? So yes, on our conference website, there under resources for participating, if you scroll down, if you hover over that phrase, you will see the link to the Padlet. So if you click on Padlet, that will take you to our conference website where you can see the different Padlet round discussions. And we'll go over this in the welcome. But if you hover over your the round with which your session is located. So for example, Rudy, you have project-based learning in round 1. You would hover over the cloud sky picture, and you will see a hand icon, and you should just be able to click on that, and that will take you to the Padlet. The Padlet is being used as a way for us to note take. Anyone can note take, anyone can post resources that they think would be helpful. We're encouraging people to post those resources and those notes and those reflections on the Padlet instead of the chat, just because those of us who would love to go to 5 different sessions in one round will be looking to the Padlet for notes from that discussion session. Let's see. Other questions. Thank you, Melinda, for giving us some tips on the polling in the Zoom settings. Let's see. So again, David, I'm not sure if you joined us in time, but we will not be recording the breakout sessions. We will be recording the welcome and keynote sessions. Great to have you guys from Maryland, from Texas. Okay. Question from Anna about, do you have to put notes into the Padlet during the Zoom meeting, or can you put it after? It's really up to you. You can, it's easy and pretty functional. If you're not familiar with Padlet, you just click on the plus icon and write an entry. So you can take notes during, we've seen different implementation uses. Some people have breakout sessions where everybody is entering in notes and comments. Others maybe the Zoom host is taking over that role. It's really up to you.
Because you check me off right here.
How do we know who our Zoom host will be? Good question, Monique. If you are a facilitator, you should have gotten an email with a link to a Google document, and that would show you who your host is. And if it's not you, it's likely somebody from the Beatles and BaySci team. So if you see somebody's name, feel free to chat us in the Zoom group chat. Can you post the link here? The link for the Padlet?
Oh, no, that's, hold on. That's Cindy again. I tried to refresh and I can get into it on my phone. I just can't on my computer. So I refreshed, but maybe if you post that link in the chat and I can click on it, it'll let it happen. I don't know.
Okay, and Cindy, are you talking about the link to the website, the conference website?
Schedule.
The schedule.
Yes,
Okay.
please. Thank
So
you.
maybe somebody from our BaySci team can go ahead and do that because I'm noting the time. Thank you, Jetta, for posting that. Thank you, Christine, for posting that. It's 9:58, and as we prepare to officially begin the conference, I would like to remind you how you can see more of BaySci and Beetles at the Lawrence Hall of Science. We invite you to reach out to us at baysci@berkeley.edu and/or beetles@berkeley.edu. The beetles@berkeley.edu is also our official conference email that you can access on our conference website. BaySci and Beetles and the Lawrence Hall of Science stand ready to work in partnership with and assist educational institutions and organizations during this very challenging and stressful time. We work regionally, nationally, and internationally to support equitable, high quality science and math teaching and learning and environmental literacy. If you're interested in learning more, we invite you to visit our websites found at the bottom of our slideshow or reaching out to us by responding to any one of our registrant emails or reaching out directly through the group chat to any one of our BaySci or Beetles teams. So I do want to go ahead and get us started. It's 10 o'clock and I will turn it over to my colleague Jetta Foreman.
Hi all, it's lovely to see you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and then we'll get started. All right. Thank you so much for being here. We're thrilled by the excitement and the turnout for this event, and we're so glad that we're able to offer this space and structure for discussion during these challenging and isolating times. Social media type, please tag us at Berkeley Science or use the hashtag Lawrence Hall of Science if you're posting about this event or anything like that. Before we begin, we want to honor that wherever we are in North America, we're on stolen and occupied land, and we invite you to acknowledge the Indigenous people whose land you're on now in a small way by sharing it in the chat. Land acknowledgements like this one are just one very small way to contribute to decolonization and land justice movements. And we encourage you all to think about deeper ways that you are currently partnering or could partner with Indigenous leaders and communities wherever you are. So I'll pause for just a second and give folks the opportunity to contribute to the chat. We also want to acknowledge the recent momentum for racial justice in the United States and around the world. Much of the national discourse has focused on police violence, and we also want to acknowledge that racist policies, laws, systems, and actions extend far beyond police brutality. Many of our education systems and structures, both formal and informal, are rooted in racism and ideas of white supremacy culture. This is a time for greater self-examination of all of our society's institutions and structures, including our own organizations and our education system at large. We hope that in some very small way, some of the sessions of this open space can play a role in bringing about an opportunity for reflection on teaching and learning and promote change for justice and belonging. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Vanessa, once again.
Thank you, Jetta. So for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Vanessa Lujan, and I direct the BaySci program at the Lawrence Hall of Science. The BaySci and Beetles teams are so excited to be here with you today, and also have deep gratitude for the time you're dedicating here to be in community with us and others. Both the BaySci and Beetles programs are systems level organizational capacity building efforts. BaySci is an effort to support district and school systems to build and sustain equitable, high quality science education and environmental literacy. Beetles is a project to build capacity to support outdoor science education organizations. Both engage networks of partners. Jetta, if you can advance the slide. Today, we're bridging these two efforts and our respective networks of partners, colleagues, and new friends from across the globe, you, to inspire, share, discuss, ideate, and take action to improve our current context, in particular through formal and informal partnerships. Formal being districts and schools, informal being community organizations, science centers, museums, outdoor programs, etc. This conference brings together district and school leaders, classroom teachers, educators, parents, state and government agency leaders, higher education leaders, and our community organizations, or informals, make up over half of our participants today. Next slide. We have over 70 proposed sessions for this conference, and you can see the breadth and range of topics here if you get a magnifying glass. Social emotional learning benefits of the outdoors, affinity spaces, regional collaboration spaces, understanding the operations side of managing programs during COVID-19, family engagement, how to support students who need to manage school and working a job to support their families during this time, just to name a few. Next slide. And all of these sessions come together on our schedule page on our conference website with this at a glance shown here. So I'm just going to help you read it a little bit. You see that we have the main Zoom link at the top with a call-in feature. And then you'll see within each day, today being Tuesday, July 28th, you can see that we have our Zoom and live stream for our welcome and keynote. Those are the same Zoom links that we are on right now, and live stream if you're joining us through YouTube. And then each round, we have 2 rounds of breakout discussions today. If you click on each of those links, then you can see the sessions that are happening during that particular time frame and or concurrent session. So as a reminder, affinity spaces are for people who share those identities, not allies. Between sessions, there are breaks intentionally for you to have time to take care of yourselves. For me, that's my moment to check in and make sure that my 2 boys haven't been eaten by wild dogs. And lastly, we ask that you please refresh the schedule page on our conference website before you log on to our closing session. And that's because if need be, we will be adding a second Zoom link for the closing so that everyone has a chance to connect by Zoom and not through the YouTube live stream to engage in a breakout reflection. Jetta?
Great, thanks, Vanessa. All right. We want to share some tools that we're offering to help support this conference to run smoothly before we begin. So this Zoom video tutorial is posted in the information for participants, and maybe chat moderators, if you can just post the link to that document, that would be great. That's also under the resources and then resources for participants on the website. If there's any of these functions that aren't familiar to you, please take a look at this visual and kind of practice using some of these features. We'll also talk in a minute about ways that you can always come back and get technical support if you're having any issues. We're also inviting folks to use this Padlet to share questions, take notes, share resources, etc. This is a resource for sharing across discussions as well, so that you can get a glimpse into that other session that you really wanted to attend, but you couldn't be in 2 places at once. So on the website, under resources for participating, there's a link to this home Padlet, and then you can click right here, these images, to be taken to the specific Padlets for each round. And then once you're in the round 1 Padlet, for instance, you can scroll across to find the session that you're in, and everyone will be able to take notes in a vertical column for the session that they're in, or use it to share resources, etc. We will share out this Padlet at the end so that everyone has access to it as well. In addition to the more technical tools, we also have some emotional tools to offer. We ask that everyone consider these practices as you're in discussion with each other. These can be a tool for self-reflection, so you might choose to focus on 1 or 2 for yourself during the day. For example, you might think, you know, usually I contribute right away and frequently to a group discussion, so today I'm going to try and wait for 3 people to talk before me before I say anything. They could also be used to draw the group's awareness to something that they said, or that's a pattern that's happening within the group. So you might say, hey all, can we practice slowing down a little so there's more time to think and reflect? These are best practices that we learned from the National Equity Project and the Art of Conversation, and they're posted on the website as well, so that you always have access to using these practices for yourself and for the groups that you're part of. We also want to share the principles of open space. These we did not invent, but come to us from what's called the open space technology, which is the structure of this whole conference. Our goal and the goal of open space technology is really to create a framework for you to engage in discussions with colleagues and collaborators that you might not otherwise have a chance to talk to. The idea is to kind of replicate those aha moments at normal conferences when that usually occur when you're walking and you happen to talk to someone now as you're walking between sessions or something like that about the things that are actually really relevant and timely and important to you. So the whole structure of this this conference is set up to just create those opportunities for discussion and processing. So first, whoever shows up is the right group, is a reminder to just be present, to not be worried that there aren't enough people or there are too many people in a group. And if it's just you, take some time to think and reflect and write in your journal. Second, whatever happens is the only thing that could have. Be prepared to be surprised in a positive way. The conversations and discussions might not go exactly as you planned or you thought that they might, but trust the group to find its way and to take the conversation in meaningful directions. Third, whenever it starts is the right time, and whenever it's over, it's over. Don't let the clock or our very carefully pre-planned schedule dictate your conversations or be a detriment to your discussions. Use the schedule as it's useful and let the conversation continue or end early when that's useful as well. You can always share contact information to continue the conversation, etc. But we want you to not try to schedule those breakthrough moments or epiphanies as much as possible. And we offer the schedule as a resource and a tool and a way that we can all be on somewhat of the same page. And finally, we want you to remember that you are in control of where you are. Feel free to leave a conversation if it's not working for you, and remember to respect those choices for yourself and others around you. It's not an insult to a group or a discussion or a judgment on the quality of that discussion to leave. It's just an individual choice. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're neither learning nor contributing, feel free to move to a more productive space. You can exit and enter a Zoom discussion at any point. Finally, should you need anything throughout these 2.5 days, we offer you the watering hole. We will always, one of our team members will always be at the watering hole, which is just this Zoom link. All the plenary sessions have the same Zoom link, which is the same Zoom link for the watering hole. You'll also see the links in the schedule for each round. And we're here for tech support, drop-in chatting, anything that you need or want over the course of these half days. Someone will be here to answer your questions and help support you. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for the day, Dr. Andrea Kane. Dr. Kane is the superintendent of Queen Anne's County Public Schools in Maryland. She's been there since 2017. She also co-chairs the Superintendents for Environmental Education Collaborative, which is a national network of superintendents across the United States. She has led Green School certification for 100% of the schools in Queen Anne's County Public Schools, and she's led the development of an environmental literacy plan that addresses preschool through 12th grade. Dr. Kane, thank you so much for spending this time with us, and I'm excited to turn it over to you, and it will take me just a second here to switch to your slides.
Great. Well, good morning, or it's afternoon to me, but it's morning to some out on the West Coast. So great. I'm glad to be here. Glad that I'm able to have a moment to talk about some of the things that we're doing in Queen Anne's County, as well as some issues that are relevant to everybody as we begin to start schools, reopen schools in a variety of ways. For the upcoming school year. I'm also going to say a couple of things about the notions of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice as it pertains to opening schools and as it pertains to environmental education. So first of all, thank you. This is my first open space conference, so I'm happy to have an opportunity to participate in this, and I'm looking forward to some of the sessions that I'm going to be able to take part in and engage in some conversations. So thank you for sharing the screen. I guess I'll just go ahead and jump right in. And if there's time at the end, I'm happy to take some questions if there are any. So my presentation is about using school district. And if your screen is showing like mine, and perhaps I need to change my view, if your screen is showing like mine, you might have some of your area cut off. So I'm just gonna take a second to, there we go. Using school district and environmental education partners to leverage equity issues related to online learning. And I'm going to also add related to environmental education. Next slide. So the purpose, as I just mentioned, is to share some ideas about how a rural school district, which is what I am, increases environmental literacy of students in collaboration with our environmental partners. And I'm going to discuss how to leverage equity issues related to online learning and environmental literacy. Next slide. So the next couple of slides is just to give you a flavor of life in Queen Anne's County. So as I mentioned, we're a rural district. So we have lots of cornfields, lots of chicken farms, and our kids engage in environmental education on a regular basis. You can advance to the next slide. If there are just more pictures, just to give you a flavor of what's going on in Queen Anne's County. You're looking at some students that that are a part of a Gracie project, and that's an elementary school, Graysonville Elementary School. And our students and parents and environmental partners engage our students year-long in advocacy for environmental literacy. They have met with legislators in Annapolis, Maryland. They have collaborated with business owners. The decking that you see was the project of some local parents and business owners. And we dedicated that outdoor yard space, it's in the backyard of our school, Graysonville Elementary School, to environmental literacy and investigating the outdoors. That school happens to be in an area that has a lower income population, and so and not a ton of green spaces in some of the areas, although we are largely a rural district. I am going to say, just because you know, I love Queen Anne's County, don't get me wrong, but I do recognize that there are school districts that don't have green spaces. With respect to our urban districts and students living in crowded places, we recognize that everyone does not have the opportunities that our students have in Queen Anne's County. Next slide, please. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, in Maryland, we were the first state to require a comprehensive multidisciplinary approach to environmental education. That was in 1989. By 1999, we had adopted our first environmental literacy standards. Now, this past school year to 2020, we transitioned from the notion of environmental education to environmental literacy because there have been some changes in our standards. So there was some redundancy in standards for science, social studies, and health. And because our environmental literacy standards are multidisciplinary, we wanted to reduce some of that redundancy. We wanted to be sure that students understood that there's a relationship between themselves and their environment. We wanted to be sure that they understood how to protect the environment and to preserve natural resources. And we wanted to be sure that they understood that environmental literacy is about investigating environmental issues. We use meaningful watershed educational experiences, MeWe, in our elementary, middle, and our high school curricula. And we also use field experiences and opportunities for stewardship, as well as workplace experiences to enhance students' understanding of environmental issues. Next slide, please. What you're looking at, and it is microscopic, but I'm happy to provide it for anyone who is interested in having it. This is the Queen Anne's County Public Schools environmental education, if you will, literacy matrix. And so it ranges from pre-K to grade 12. There is a major focus in investigative issues across grade levels. Of course, you can see that the pre-K one is still in development, but what we do is we ensure that they are getting those outdoor experiences in their schoolyard habitat. Each one of our 14 schools has a space for schoolyard habitat. So kids can learn outside at each one of our schools, whether it's elementary, middle, or high. And you can see some of the investigative issues. For example, in first grade, we look at where does all the rain go? So of course, we're looking at the water cycle. In fourth grade, we're looking at change over time. How have human civilizations changed the Chesapeake Bay watershed? What's our experiences with the watershed? We live on the Chesapeake Bay. So we happen to be a school district that is rich in resources for outdoor education. We have listed some of our environmental partners in this matrix because they were absolutely crucial to creating the matrix and in providing that outdoor experience for all of our students. So Sultana was one of the partners that helped with this, Chesapeake Bay Environmental Center. We have several partners, and I'm going to mention some of them on slides that come next. If you go to the next slide, what you'll see are some expectations that we have. So goals for ourselves. Every student will have an outdoor learning experience every year. We have created outdoor experiences in collaboration with our environmental ed partners across all of the grade levels. Last school year, I didn't do it this spring, obviously, because we were all closed, but last school year I was able to go to Horn Point with our 9th graders. And that's an experience that all of our 9th graders have so that they understand the impact of oysters and oyster restoration, because we're right here on the water. And we also have expectations for all of our teachers. So all of our teachers are trained to implement our environmental literacy curricula. School staff get introduced to it in the beginning of the year, and then they go through the year and collaborate with our partners. We have grade level professional development aside from content-based professional development. And we certainly specialize in those field investigations, not only for our students, but for our instructional staff. We look at cross-curricular importance. And so we tried our best to make an effort to integrate those environmental literacy standards across content areas. There are some that are easier than others. So science is an easy connection. And, as we talk about students understanding their place in environmental issues and their impact, social studies becomes an easy one. When we look at health, that becomes an easy one. So there are areas that are easier than others. But then we go beyond that and we look at the fine arts areas, and we have students who are able to advocate artistically. We had a student this past year to win an art contest where that student was able to make a bookmark and posters and those kinds of things. That was a contest sponsored by our state. So, those are things that we look at, making it real for students and connecting across curricular areas. Those are some of the things that we think are important. And of course, they're expected, with our state. We try to go above and beyond in Queen Anne's County. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the areas that we collaborate with our environmental partners. So without reading the list to you, you certainly can take a look at that. I will mention some of the projects that we've done. Of course, our environmental concerns group, they did a wonderful, wonderful job in supporting our schools as we sought green school status. We have Atkins Arboretum. We have the Chesapeake Bay Environmental Center, which is right here in Queen Anne's County. We collaborate with Upstream Alliance. They do a lot of work with the Superintendent's Environmental Education Collaborative. We call it SEEK for short. The Coastal Conservation Association of Maryland, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Chesapeake Bay Trust, all of these partners impact our curriculum and our students' engagement every single day as we implement our curriculum. Next slide, if you will. This one is just, again, I was able to connect with our sponsors through the Environmental Education Summit, which happened this past May. And that, again, involved more of our partners. Maryland Association of Environmental Outdoor Education, that's MAO. Shore Rivers collaborated with us, and we were able to, I was able to speak at an environmental education summit and able to connect with several new partners. And I'm going to talk a little bit about partners, their importance, and some of the work that they're doing shortly. So if you advance to the next slide. I want to talk about some of the things that are on everybody's mind right now, and that is how we're going to reopen schools. Now, given we're all in different places, and I can tell you in Maryland, we are just starting to finalize our plans for how we'll reopen. But it's safe to say that schools are either, wherever you are, you're either going to have some hybrid of face-to-face school or virtual learning. You're going to start with fully virtual learning, or you're going to end up transitioning, probably, at least we anticipate at some point during the year, whether you open face-to-face, there may be a necessity to transition to online learning because of resurgence or whatever. We don't know what's coming down the road. So we want to think about, what are the outdoor spaces that could possibly be used as classrooms. It gives respect to physical distancing in classrooms, as well as we do have to consider, which was a big issue for us, and I know it is for a lot of school district, transportation issues on buses. Because we have to respect those physical distancing requirements there as well. So, with respect to that, there are different models that school districts are implementing right now. And I just wanted to call everyone's attention to, if you haven't seen it already, the NAAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education, and Mayo, our Maryland Association for Environmental Education, Outdoor Education, sorry for the typo there, is they put out a guide. And that guide is very specific with ideas to help school districts reimagine their opening. So there are some how-tos and some guidance there for schools, how school districts can support families when students are learning at home. There's some information there about how schools can create some outdoor spaces. There's information in this guide that helps schools to sort of lead parents along as they are becoming their students' teacher at home, what they could do in the backyard if they have one, what they may be able to do in their community green spaces or even parks. There are a lot of tips that I think would be relevant for any school district as we imagine reopening. So, and I certainly am happy to link that if you could Google it or go to either of, NAAEE or to Mayo, and you'll be able to get the document. But as schools begin to reopen, and we have so many things that we're trying to consider, here's an opportunity for us to really take advantage of the many benefits, right, that outdoor education, environmental education offers. There's research out there, and I probably don't have to tell any of you, but there's research out there that shows the reduction in stress level when we can get outside and actively engage with the earth, whether we're talking about water or we're talking about soil or the air. There's research that shows that this is beneficial, not only for our students, but let's face it, it's beneficial for our instructors, our teachers, our administrators, those who support students wherever they are. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody recognized that there are some guides out there that are going to be quite helpful for us. So next slide. Some of the ideas for virtual learning, of course, there are already education partners who have content-rich programming already done, digital content already done, virtual field trips, just working closely with our partners, whether we start face-to-face, fully virtual, kids are at home, there are virtual camps that are going on over the summer months. So there are lots of things that are already done. We don't have to reinvent. Connecting with our environmental partners, I think, is absolutely key. And the next slide is going to talk a little bit about, projects that families can do with children at home. Of course, I acknowledge immediately that there are differences in students' access to resources. So let's just put that on the table. If I am a child who lives in an urban area or a crowded area where there is no green space, how do I engage? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. How do I engage that child in environmentalism? We have to make sure that we recognize that the learning experiences have to be relevant to the students. right? So if you're going to ask me to do a project on something in my backyard and I don't have a backyard, I can't engage in that. If my school is going to ask me to do a project at a park and I don't have transportation to a park, or I don't have an adult at home that can get me to some of these places, that's a barrier. And so we first want to recognize that there are some differences, and that the learning has to absolutely be relevant. For those who are able, we want to be sure to incorporate those lessons and those activities that they can, where they can use their backyard or a neighborhood green space, or if they are in proximity to a park. Recognizing that there's also a place for research about perhaps sustainability if you don't have an outdoor space. Air quality, not only air quality outdoors, but air quality indoors. We're looking at food sources. This is all relevant to children who may not be able to get outside and to learn outside. Recycling, what can I do at home if I don't have green space or I can't go outside? What can I do for recycling? There's always art. If I can draw, if I can paint, if I can color, then there's that opportunity for me to express as a student my engagement or my advocacy for environmentalism. Next slide. So here's what my thinking is. My thinking is that we perhaps in many places need to reframe our thinking around environmentalism. If I'm, like I mentioned before, in a green space, in an urban area or a crowded area where there's not a lot of green space, if I'm in a place where I don't have a lot of support from adults who think that this environmentalism is even important, what can I do? Next slide, please. Here, a lot of people think that environmentalism looks like this, right? And I'm happy to say I was able to actually take these photographs, but everybody can't go to Africa. Everybody can't go to South Africa. Everybody can't be engaged in preserving lands for wildlife and far, far, far away. If you go to the next slide, what we have to think about is how we can get past some of the barriers. So in preparing for today, I had some conversations and sort of did some polls on, what some of the barriers are. And I'm talking about for those students who do not have access to a lot of green spaces. And these were some of the things that I heard. I think about agriculture. And that makes me think of history as Black people. And so I'm not doing anything outside. It's a white thing. Outside of school, I don't see myself in that area, in the area of environmentalism. I don't see myself in that realm at all. Another parent, this is a parent that said, I have to intentionally engage my son in growing his own food. Otherwise, if it doesn't happen in school, it's not going to happen, right? Urban living isn't conducive to environmentalism because of a lack of green space. But then there was a person who responded who was a part of the transportation industry and reminded me that environment, goes hand in hand with transportation. There are large projects that happen in urban areas, sometimes poor neighborhoods, and those can have a negative impact on air quality. That's environmentalism, right? Title VI in the transportation world speaks to the fact that organizations have to get together with communities to talk about the impact that those projects are going to have on that community. Next slide. So here are the facts. Environmental education includes reducing environmental impacts such as waste, water, energy, improving health and wellness. And yes, we talk about air quality. We talk about contaminant control, school food. Kids are interested in that universally. We look at real world learning, civic engagement, that's advocacy, STEM connections, green career preparation. All of those things are relevant to what can happen regardless of a student's zip code. Next slide, please. And additionally, it's important to note disproportional impacts on neighborhoods of, that are urban and that are lower income families living there. Sometimes there's a lack of transportation, access to parks and green spaces. And I found a quote that somebody said, you don't have to be outdoorsy nature lover, to be down for the cause being environmental literacy, right? Next slide.
And Dr. Kane, we have just a couple more minutes before we transition into the next sessions.
And I just checked my watch and I saw that I talked too long. So I just want to close with some ideas about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And you can go to the next slide. And I'm not going to belabor the point because we'll make the slides available to everybody. When we're talking about diversity, we're talking about who's in the room. Right? Who's engaging in this work, and are there barriers to the work? Next slide. Next slide, we talk about equity. And when we talk about equity, we're also, I'm sorry, this one I wanted to put in there because this is a great resource, the Center for Diversity and the Environment. Next slide. The next slide talks about equity, equitable access, whether it's a green space or it's advocacy or it's access to a curricula that teaches our students about their place and their impact on the environment. The next slide, please, talks about inclusion. Has everyone's idea been heard? This person, Rue Mapp, she's the founder for Outdoor Afro, and that focuses on that connection between Black history and nature. It's important for everyone to feel like they are included. For people who look like me. Parks are for people who look like me. That's not common, but that is, I felt that poignant. The next slide, please, talks about justice. And this is a group out of New York, We Act. Some of you may know about this group for environmental justice. And they look at everything that is urban and the impact on people's lives, regardless of where they live, specifically literacy, environmental literacy, and advocacy for those living in crowded and urban areas. Next slide, please. And just as I had mentioned earlier, the many, many benefits, and I cited a couple of sources here that you can find about reduced stress, greater mental and physical health and well-being. As we open schools, reopen schools, whether we are face-to-face or virtual, that social emotional learning piece has got to be a part of it. And I think that environmental literacy, environmental education absolutely lends itself quite well to that. So next slide just finishes it up. And if these are our lovely students in Queen Anne's County, and you can just advance right straight through to the last one, which gives my contact information should you need to get in contact with me. I saw some of the comments that were there. I will make sure that you get the EE guide from NAAEE. I will certainly make sure that, Jetta has my slides, so we can certainly share those. And if there's anything else that I can offer to anyone, I am certainly happy to do so.
Thanks so much, Dr. Kane. We were tracking a lot of questions in the chat, and there seems to be one that I can condense a few of them that might help a lot of people out there. The question is, what first step would you recommend a teacher or leader or district to take to build an equitable environmental literacy program?
First things first, partners and interested employees, whether we're talking about teachers, instructional assistants, administrators, there are people in every district, I am absolutely convinced. And you have to get that group that's on fire for this work. And then tap into that group, connect with those partners that are close to and share ideas about the importance of environmental education with students and with parents, and engage that group. When we have a groundswell of people who are interested, it can begin there. So I recognize that our time is short, but get those folks who are interested in this work, because it does take a bit of work, but the interest and the passion for it, and to look at how it's not all tree hugging. It is a variety of things that families and schools can do together along with environmental partners to advance this work. It's for everybody. Environmentalism does not have a color unless it's green and blue and brown.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kane. We might need to do another open space conference just so we can have a second keynote from you. I hope you get a minute to read the chat, because there's a ton of admiration and inspiration being expressed in the chat right now for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So our next thing on our schedule is starting in just a couple of minutes. Let me pull up the schedule right here. So 10:45, the concurrent discussions for round 1 are starting. You'll need to log out of this meeting, and then you'll go to the website and to the schedule. And for the session that you're interested in joining, you'll be able to click to join the Zoom by computer, or if you need to join by phone, there's an option for that as well. And the watering hole, this meeting will stay open. If you're on the live stream now, and you need some tech support, you'll be able to join this Zoom in just a couple minutes as people start logging off and there's more room again. So take a couple minutes as a break and come to the watering hole if you need help. And we'll see you later this afternoon for the end of day 1 share out if you're able to join. If you do need any support at this time, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask any questions that you might have. Or you can post something in the chat as well if you have a question or need support.
Can you just put the link to the website into the chat box, and then I can just click on it because I didn't get it all?
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course.